And so, Cloak Number One, after a bloody and brutal elimination-style battle, it comes down to just the two of us. Don't you think you're overselling it just a bit? How do you mean? Well, the Last Angry Geek only has 4 characters. I mean, you took down Herlido, and I took down that awful Frenchie from the video game Confession spoof. I mean, it was a 4-man tournament, hardly a bloodbath. Whatever. Have at you! Look, I hardly think this is fair. The Last Angry Geek doesn't do special effects, so I can't hurl my balls at your face. Ha! Yeah, this is just a ripoff of the Hunger Games! Unoriginal. A ripoff of a far more popular series. An inferior knockoff. But enough about my fan mail. Hi everyone, I'm the Last Angry Geek, and this is Comic Book Issues. You know, some books just won't die. They grow, evolve, get cancelled, and are finally repackaged as a brand new series. This is the case with Avengers: The Initiative. Spinning out of Iron Man's win of the Marvel Civil War, The Initiative was created by Dan Slott as a title where fledgling superheroes would be trained and licensed by the government. It survived in various forms until Norman Osborn was brought down and the Superhero Registration Act was repealed. This led to Avengers Academy, where several of Osborn's next wave of supervillains were being trained to be heroes in the hopes of circumventing that destiny. The book quickly became a critical darling and a fan favorite, but not a huge financial success. But it's the era of Marvel now, and several of the Academy kids have been spun off into the latest teen book with the word Avengers in the title. Because, fuck you, the Avengers movie made $1 billion, so any comic book that has Avengers in its title will have to be a bestseller. But I'm off on a tangent. We now have Avengers Arena. Almost immediately, the book was maligned as being just a ripoff of the Hunger Games, which in itself was accused of being a ripoff of the Japanese movie Battle Royale, where teens all fight to the death. Many of the harshest critics were fans of Avengers Academy, who were outraged at the death in the first issue. But controversy aside, is this book any good? Written by Dennis Hopeless and drawn by Kev Walker, this is Avengers Arena, issues 1 through 3. The book opens on day 29, and we see former Avengers Academy member Hazmat talk about her cynicism, and how complaining has always made her feel better. But that attitude is doing her no good as she takes on her former teammate, the book's token mutant, X-23. Hazmat knows there's no way she can win this fight as the girl clone of Wolverine stabs her, and she blacks out. The book then hops back to day 1 at the Avengers Academy. With most of the staff and class gone, the only ones there are Justin and his pet Sentinel, X-23 and Reptile, and Hazmat, a walking biohazard, and her boyfriend Metal, whose skin turned to, well, metal, but not like his name. His name is spelled M-E-T-T-L-E. His skin is M-E-T-A-L. The two lovebirds have recently consummated their long-standing romance from Avengers Academy. Be very grateful for that blanket. After all, Metal's skin fell off when his powers developed and his bones turned to red steel. Think about it. No skin and only his bones turned to red metal. You ever skin a hot dog? They find themselves teleported to a strange island as a man sitting before a giant screen looks over the readouts. It shows that besides the Academy kids, 11 others are now on this island. They awaken to a voice emitted from a strange robot, before being greeted by Arcade, longtime X-Men villain. The kids are trapped on this island and for the next 30 days will have to fight for food, water, shelter. At the end of those 30 days, only one of the kids will still be alive. Arcade admits he got the idea from some kids' books. Okay, maybe this series is a ripoff, but think about it. How many people do you know who have actually read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Arcade releases them from his hold and the teen heroes rush the villain. The formerly powerless Arcade then displays a surprising amount of godlike abilities and mops the floor with the assorted good guys. Things settle down and the teens tell Arcade they won't kill each other just because he said so, but Arcade points out they don't really know one another that well. Distrust, as well as a desire to live, will do the rest. Metal then finds Hazmat, who was knocked into a snowdrift by Arcade. As Arcade offers to kill the weakest member of the group as voted by the others, Hazmat begins marching back, but Metal stops her. Arcade just kicked all of their butts. They need to take him seriously and think about how to survive. Hazmat arrives and blasts Arcade. He decides that she is the weakest link, and when he offers her an out if anyone else will take her place, he drives home his earlier point. No one says a word. That is until Metal arrives. He's the weakest link. With blood dripping down Hazmat's helmet, Arcade welcomes them to Murder World. Still beats Epcot. Issue 2 opens just moments later. A young cyborg girl named Riker thinks about nature's fight or flight instinct. She bumps into a winged girl named Red Raven accidentally, who then takes off into the air but slams into an invisible barrier, falling to the ground dead. She tries to talk to Hazmat, telling her she's sorry for what happened to Metal, but Hazmat freaks out, screaming that she's not weak. She charges Riker, causing her cybernetics to activate. She sprays Hazmat with flames before avoiding retaliatory strikes and weakly saying she's sorry. We flash back to her past and see that she was a championship swimmer. She didn't really care for swimming, but her father tells her that competition builds character. She came home one day to find her mother and brother held hostage by a deathlock cyborg. A moment later, their house is destroyed in an explosion. Back on, let's call it the island. My apologies to fans of The Prisoner. Riker runs into a girl in a spacesuit named Cammy. She pulls a gun and tells Riker to freeze, as she's almost stepped on a landmine. She's grateful and introduces herself as Becca, but Cammy isn't having it. She recognizes her as a deathlock cyborg and only spoke up so she didn't get hit by shrapnel. She draws on Becca Riker and tells her to go away. In another flashback, from Becca's point of view, we see her father trying to graft cybernetics onto her mother with no success. His computer tells him that Becca is alive and awake. He explained that this has happened to him before. He creates the Deathlock cyborg, and people from the future have been sending his own creations back in time to kill him before he could invent it. He's always been well protected, but never expected them to attack his home and family when he wasn't there. He explains that previous Deathlock cybernetics were grafted onto corpses. Rebecca is still alive, so she will be in control of herself. This is when S.H.I.E.L.D. arrives, kicking down the doors. Back on the island, Becca finds a campfire but is caught by the kids around it. They quickly question if they should kill her or whether she's a threat as she pleads for her life. It's all moot when the group's leader tells them to stop. She invites Becca to sit with them. They're British superheroes from something called the Braddock Academy. They are Kid Britain, her boyfriend and the Captain Britain of an alternate universe, Nara, a violent and antisocial Atlantean, Cullen Bloodstone from a family of monster hunters, and Anachronism, an ex-nerd now in the body of an immortal warlord. So he went from a fat nerd to a barbarian with sculpted abs. Yeah, he's really suffering. How come there are never any magic spells that give beautiful people's bodies like mine? Now that's a curse. Their leader introduces herself as Katie Bashir. She can fly. Becca introduces herself and takes on the name Cammy threw at her earlier, Deathlocket. Katie recognizes her last name and asks if Harlan Riker is her father. She's a bit of a science nerd and recognizes him as an expert on cybernetics. In the final flashback, a scientist explains that her father used cutting-edge technology and software to save her life after the bomb. He hands her a mirror and she sees herself for the first time. He explains they aren't sure how long it will take her to learn to control her cybernetics, just as she teleports away to Murder World. Back at the campfire, Becca laughs. She realizes she's about to get all the training she could ever want. Issue 3 opens on day 8. Cammy narrates that someone has been attacking the various camps, setting fires and thus playing on the nerves of the kids. Spying on Justin, she sees that his repair efforts finally pay off and his Sentinel is back online. However, its sensors warn of an approaching hostile. Cammy can't get a good look and moves to getting closer, only to see the Sentinel, still protecting Justin, being hurled right at her. Knowing she's outclassed, she takes off only to be followed by Darkhawk. He follows her to a burning crater and she flies in behind him on her jetpack, shooting him with her laser gun. It's mostly for naught, though he admits to being mildly impressed. We flash back to before Murder World and visit the Peak, the orbital headquarters of S.W.O.R.D. S.W.O.R.D. was first introduced in Astonishing X-Men. Think of it as S.H.I.E.L.D., but its agents protect Earth from extraterrestrial threats. Of course, given the mess that was Secret Invasion, it's pretty much the FEMA of the Marvel Universe. Also, it was created by Joss Whedon, so you know it's going to be run by a take-charge woman. Case in point, Cammy is interrogated by the head of S.W.O.R.D., Agent Brand. Brand is aware that Cammy is a human from Alaska who was abducted by aliens 2 years ago. They caught her stealing fuel from an alien spaceship. They also know she used to travel with Drax the Destroyer during Marvel's Cosmic Annihilation event. Brand wants to know how she went from sidekick to space pirate. We then return to the standoff. She recognizes him as Darkhawk. He's also investigating the hits on the camps and was hoping to scare the assailants straight. Hers was one of 3 sets of tracks, and Darkhawk asks if she'd like to help him track down the other 2. Cammy notices that Chris, or Darkhawk, isn't a teenager. He points out he started as a teen hero, which is when he was the most famous. People still tend to think of him as a teenager, and he's convinced this is why Arcade abducted him. Cammy decides to trust him, disarming the landmines she set up to trap him. Using her goggles, she catches sight of a face in the snow, and a moment later is attacked by X-23. X smells her and states that it wasn't you before leaving. We flash back to Cammy and Brand. Brand admits she's been impressed that a 13-year-old girl has become such a badass, but with all the crimes she's committed, she can serve a prison term in any number of intergalactic empires. It's only when Brand mentions returning her to Earth that Cammy breaks. It's the one place she doesn't want to go. Before she can explain, she's zapped away to Murder World. Stunned from X's ambush, Cammy goes over the reasons she hates Earth. Here, she's just a stupid, weak little girl. She fires off her laser in frustration, and then strips out of her spacesuit and starts punishing herself with push-ups, much to the surprise of Katie and Deathlocket. Meanwhile, Darkhawk has followed the 3rd trail and confronts the mysterious opponent with the full-on alien spacesuit Gun-O-Rama. This panel brought to you by the National Rifle Association. However, Chris's guns quickly mutate out of control and mechanical tendrils hoist him into the air. A moment later, his armor disappears as the amulet that grants him his abilities is ripped out of his chest and left hanging in a tree. So that's the first 3 issues of Avengers Arena. Now, because I love you people, I actually sat down and watched the Hunger Games movie to see if the comparisons were apt. And while one is a brutal, survive-at-all-costs elimination match, the other is the Hunger Games. Suffice to say, aside from teams killing each other, I didn't feel like the 2 stories had much in common. In fact, so far in Avengers Arena, no teen has killed another. They've either been killed by Arcade and his technology or some mysterious entity, which may or may not be one of the kidnappers. Comparisons aside, let's take a closer look at Avengers Arena. It's almost unfair to call this book an Avengers title. There's not a single Avenger in it, just a handful of kids who trained at the Avengers Academy. But with the Avengers movie making so much money, we're going to see a phase of throwing Avengers on just about every title out there for a while. Now, I'm a huge fan of Kev Walker's art. He was co-artist over on Thunderbolts, coincidentally enough recently renamed Dark Avengers. He had a primal way of drawing men and women that really worked for that title. I'm not sure he's right for this book, drawing a group of children and teenagers when he's so good at drawing adults. Still, it doesn't take away from the quality of the art he's producing. His Sentinel and his take on Deathlocket are excellent, and his background work on the island makes it seem like a lush and mysterious place. Also, Walker excels at the action sequences and bloody consequences of Arcade's madness. This is hard for me to explain. I just prefer he were drawing a different book, as I don't think his style lends itself well to a book starring teenagers. The art is still fantastic, it just seems mismatched to the title, and that's hard to get over. On the bright side, story-wise, this book is filled with new or lesser-known characters, meaning there's plenty of cannon fodder. If you're promising a fight to the death, the best way to accomplish that is to fill your book with characters of your own making that you have the freedom to kill off. And of the remaining half dozen or so characters who've made previous appearances, most of them could be classified as fan favorites at best. There's no one here, except maybe X-23, who Marvel will be using for future movies or television. Now, so far we haven't had one single narrative to follow over 3 issues. Whether or not we're going to return to Deathlocket, Hazmat, or Cammy's point of view remains to be seen. But as it stands, we've no real central character to follow or root for as of yet. Also, the story is disjointed as a result. For instance, the immediate follow-up on Metal's death is by a complete stranger instead of his girlfriend or teammates. Also, the book is making liberal use of flashbacks to show the history of the kidnapped children. It also uses a flash forward in the first issue to show one of the last days on the island. I think that's a mistake, as it more or less takes Hazmat and X-23 off the table as far as casualties go. If these 2 are the last left, then it kills some of the mystery of who will or won't make it. As for the mysteries of the island, one of the most prevalent fan theories is that the kidnapped kids are in a virtual reality controlled by Arcade, and no one is truly dead. If that is the case, then that eventual conceit will kill the stakes the book has tried to create. I've noticed it says Murder World beneath the title, and I have to wonder if and or when the story on Murder World ends, will Avengers Arena start over in a new locale with a new cast. Now, there are plenty of mysteries in this book, and the pacing is tight enough to keep the tension going. I'm enjoying the story and the art, but I can admit that this book has some flaws and could run out of steam very quickly. I give Avengers Arena, issues 1, 2, and 3, 3.5 out of 5 stars. But it's not really like the Hunger Games. I mean, Avengers Arena features an arch manipulator playing mind games with a group of people who are missing. There's an island inhabited by a strange monster no one has seen that's attacking people who are unfound. There's a group of others, excuse me, a group of other inhabitants on the island in which you are misplaced. Finally, this book makes liberal use of flashbacks to tell you about the lives of the kids before they came to the island, where they were Guys, what story is this comic ripping off?